Hi, I'm Mila Thomasone, love stylist and marriage alchemist. And today I'm talking with Devin Cameron. She is at Misfit Pursuit on Twitter. And we're talking about whether you should be a blessing and serve your husband and what that really means, how to be a helpmate and not be a doormat. So let's dive right in and hope you enjoy. Thanks so much for joining us for this conversation.
Want to talk about where this kind of came from or how we kind of got started on this?
Yeah, I've got it pulled up. So it was a conversation among women with traditional values, quote unquote. So it's like, yeah, we think we all have like the same sort of background and coming to it with the same sort of context. And somebody asked, what's it mean to be a blessing to your husband or blessing your husband? And so some guesses as to what that would mean is like being a helpmate, supporting in the home or his needs. And you said, do you want me to, can I read what you said, or do you want to just say what you think or whatever? Okay. So you said it can mean many things. Blessing your husband could be initiating sex, cooking a meal, scratching his back, doing something nice out of the ordinary, doing his laundry, etc. And then the pushback was that seems like we're becoming a mother to him, and why can't he take care of himself? And you said it's not about whether he can or can't. Of course he should be able to if he's an adult, but if he's a real and good man, he'll be working hard to provide for his family so that his wife doesn't have to work in order to stay home to raise the family. You take care of him and the kids, and he takes care of everything else. It's beautiful. And I said, yes, exactly. We can go to work and pay our own bills, buy ourselves jewelry and flowers, get our own car fixed, but then why get married or why be married? Because we can bless each other and express love for each other and make each other's lives better. So that's where we started.
Good stuff. Yes. So first, I love that we have the tool of social media just to come together and have these kind of conversations in the first place. How cool is that? But I like that, it is a trad value group, but there are people coming from all different backgrounds, and some of them are being more of the feminist kind of movement who are now straying away from that, and they're trying to figure out the ins and outs of this whole traditional value type thing, myself included. And I've come a long way from where I was, and forget where I was going with that. I do this all the time, but yeah, I thought that was really good. And that's something that I see from a lot of people who are, kind of stuck in the whole feminist mindset is, well, why can't a man do things for himself? I feel like that's a really common question that kind of comes from that spectrum of,
Yeah,
yeah,
I guess it just surprises me because it's like I feel like we're at least coming to the conversation with a base assumption that as a traditional like wife, you're gonna stay home with the kids and he's gonna work. So it's like, I don't understand where, like, of course you're doing things for each other that you could do by yourself, because like that's the point of coming together.
mm-hmm.
Is that you've got someone to lean on and to be a compliment to. And maybe I'm biased because I was a single mom and did everything myself, and yeah, the house wasn't falling down, it was all fine, but I very, very much wanted to be supported and to have,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't mean financially, I mean that's definitely part of it, but I mean supported in like life.
Right.
So
Well, we're certainly not created to do that life alone. We're definitely creatures that flourish when we are in communion with one another, when we are supporting one another and loving one another. And I personally find so much beauty in the balance of having different roles. I think that trying to take on the same role, like, it's a little, to me, redundant. Like, I mean, you can, and if that's what you want to do, then I mean, if that's what works for you and that's what makes you happy, like, do you. I, however, really like the fact that roles can be different and you don't have to serve your family unit in the exact same way as your partner. I like that there's different ways to do it, because it makes, for me, I feel like, I like to feel special. I like to feel important. I like to feel worthy. I mean, who doesn't? And so when you bring that unique piece to the table, like, that's your job, like, even in a team, I'm not a sports person, but on a team, each person has their own special part in the team, like, you have a different position, and that's awesome, because when you work together with your team and you do it well, you succeed. And I see the same exact concept as this. And for some reason, I feel like a lot of people don't have that. There's something that's disconnected there.
Right. Maybe in theory it makes sense, but then they still have this like deep, and I mean, I'm kind of speaking from my, what I recognize in myself, not trying to project on them, but I know that that sometimes I'll feel like a resentment or something that doesn't really make sense, but it's just deep in there. Yeah, you're right. It's like disconnecting from what you think it should be consciously, but it just doesn't feel right because you haven't fixed that, like,
or that hasn't been your experience. So you haven't experienced that yourself, so you kind of have that little bit of, because deep, like you said, like, that, and I feel like you deep down want that, but that hasn't been your experience. And so you're like, it just, that disconnect, which for me, like, so growing up, I was not in a traditional household. My parents were never together. Well, they were, but like very little before I was even like 2. And I went through, my mom went through a couple marriages in my childhood. So I never, and my mom was always kind of like taking on the same role as the husband. So it's like, there was never, the dynamic was just, there wasn't the traditional values. And so because of that, like, I kind of reflected those in my own relationships, and I kind of took on the same like masculine role in all of my like previous relationships. And I feel like I was always the one leading. I was always the one, like, I always would go above and beyond, and I would do all of these things, and it does get exhausting. And you're just like, man, like, what am I doing wrong? And I really I didn't know for the longest time. I just couldn't put, like, I feel like I'm doing this love thing right, but it's not working out for me. And so you get really frustrated, and you get really a little bit, you can get bitter. And so I mean, I get that where that comes from, I guess.
for sure. And you're right, it is totally exhausting. And like, I know it's hard to like bridge how people have different assumptions and what the image that comes to mind when you say certain words, because like what you just said about coming at it as like the masculine role, it almost that becomes like the mothering, doesn't it? It's kind of what came to mind for me. Yeah. It's like, yeah, it's like if you're leading and you're like overcompensating and like trying to do everything he does but better, then it's like that ends up feeling like mothering to me.
Right. Well, and if you're doing those, if you're okay, so for example, I've always been in my role of, I feel like femininity is in like, I want to serve and I want to like nurture. But the problem is that so many times I did it for the wrong man. And I didn't realize what was really out there, as far as like, there are good men out there. And I think that's why a lot of women just they can't see that, because they haven't experienced that, and they attract, I don't like to say this about people, but like low quality or low value partners based upon how much work that we have done on ourselves. And so I did that for a long time. And so when you do that for the wrong man, it does create bitterness and anxiety, and same with the roles are reversed. If you're providing for a woman who is not appreciative or grateful or doesn't give back in the ways that, you know, the dynamic should work, you're going to be exhausted and depleted. It's really about learning to bring to the table the best pieces of you. And it's very selfless. It's not a selfish thing at all. And so I think a lot of these people, women, are not used to, like, they don't know what a man who provides looks like.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And if they did, they would be like, whoa, okay, wait a minute. Maybe I do like this. Maybe I do like being taken care of, because they haven't experienced that. They haven't had a guy that stepped up and be like, this is what a man looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and if you haven't seen, that's a really good point, because if you haven't been taken care of, then yeah, you're not going to want to do his laundry or like cook meals or anything, because it's like, no, you can do that yourself. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where it comes back to, we go back, start way back in marriage, because it depends on, you know, like that's like as a father, that's your role, is to set that standard and to show your daughter what a man looks like, you know. So you should, ideally, we would all have parents that set that standard and set that expectation of what a husband and wife looks like. And unfortunately, I feel like we live in a culture where there's so many broken marriages and so many unhealed individuals that we just haven't had that example. I know that I haven't, and I would say a good vast majority of the people that I know roughly my age don't. And the ones that do are very, very grateful for it, because they know how rare it is.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I have a mentor that she likes to say that, you know, with YouTube and Google and Alexa and everything these days, like her kids don't need her to teach them anything except how she's supposed to love her husband, how they love each other. That's what they need to learn from their parents. And that makes sense to me, because one of the big things that really like got my attention when I was single and like trying to figure out dating and do I want to get remarried and things, was my therapist said, your kids aren't going to learn how to love by you loving them. They're going to learn how to love by seeing you love your husband. So, and that really just like, oh my God, that blew my mind. I was like, crap, got some work to do.
Yeah, that is a crazy realization, and it's true. It's wild, but we really do set an example of, you know, what that looks like. And luckily, like I mean, I had grandparents that were so in love, and it was awesome. So I did get to experience that up until I was in 6th grade, which was like, you know, when you're younger, those are very formative years. So I got to see that. But as an adult, I wish I could have had more of that, seen more of that. But I think that's a big issue for a lot of us, is that we just didn't have any, we don't know what it looks like, because we have never experienced it. Like, we haven't seen it, we haven't experienced it. So like, we're left out here like, what do we do? And I think that that's a lot of people in that category are just like, what do we do here? And so we're left trying to figure it out on our own. And that hasn't worked out well for us.
Definitely.
So far.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, that's why I'm writing my book that's for parents, to lay all this out, because it's like so many people or couples that even if they have a good relationship, they don't understand how important that is, one, for their kids to like pass that down. Like my parents have a pretty good like traditional sort of relationship. I mean, it's kind of codependent, but they didn't like make any major mistakes, but because of how it wasn't communicated to me, I didn't understand the importance of that dynamic. Like they didn't even specifically my mom, I think especially, didn't really believe that what she was doing was right. It was like she had all these doubts or something. And so to me,
wow.
like, so then I guess I got to figure it out. If you don't know what's right, I got to figure it out. So
wow.
yeah, it didn't work.
Wow, that's a good perspective too, because it's really, I guess, not just about setting the example, but instilling the importance of it.
Yeah.
And really making that clear, because I think that's true. That's a really good point. Because we can, we can show all we want, but if we don't explain why this is important, then I mean,
yeah. Yeah, and really like and not being shy about like your beliefs, that this I chose this path for a reason, not just randomly.
mm-hmm.
Like not just because, and I think that was the impression I got from my parents, was that it was just a predetermined path based on what their parents did. And that to me, in my like modern brain, didn't sound like the way you're supposed to choose something, like consciously, like you're supposed to choose it because it's right or it's the best option, not just because it's just the way it is, you know.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I guess that's like how it's kind of supposed to be or whatever, like that your kids are kind of going to be a little more intellectual than the parents, you know. I mean, if we're advancing each generation, which kind of makes sense, like it's, you know, the next iPhone version, it's like a little bit more advanced. You gotta like give them the tools to make better decisions, or else if you give them the impression that everything that happens is just random and we don't really choose consciously, then I don't think they're going to follow
Right.
out, even if it's a great example.
Right. And I can't speak for everybody, but I know for me, I really, really I mean, the only thing that I ever really wanted to be in life was a wife and a mother. That was all. That's it. And I didn't have these crazy career goals that everybody else had. And I did it. I put myself through school. I ended up opening my own salon. Like I did all of these things, but they never, I mean, people would be like, oh, I'm so proud of you. And I'm like, oh, that's great. But deep inside, I was like, oh, that's just not what I want. And I never had somebody that was like, it's okay to want those things. And this is how to get there. Really. Nobody really gave me the tools to say, oh, this is a good goal. This is a beautiful goal to have. And these are the things that you need to learn in order to get there and do it well.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, that's why I appreciate people like you and several others who have really kind of spoken out on this. And I've learned a lot just from being in connection with you, and I've applied stuff. I mean, and it's crazy how in just a small amount of time, how different things can be just from applying a lot of these things. Like when I used to date, because I was so hungry for it and I was so desperate for it that I think a lot of people are like that. They're so hungry and they're desperate that they settle because that's what they want, but they don't know how to get to the point where it's a healthy place. So they settle. Yeah. And there was a lot, by the grace of God, I haven't, I didn't settle. But dating and not knowing like what I needed to do in the dating season was, I think, the biggest thing for me. Like knowing what I needed, the things that I needed to do as far as dating. Because dating is like the hard part, I feel, for me.
Yeah. That's huge. It's where, I mean, that's amazing. Thank you for telling me that. That's all just so cool to hear. I love that. Yeah, it's like, that's where the foundation's laid. Like, that's where your marriage is made, like to start it off good or bad. And you need to know that, I mean, hopefully, like some people do, they say they're lucky and they like do the right things and they think it's by accident. It's not by accident, because there's all this like history that's led up to it. So it wasn't really accidental, but they can't tell you how they did it. And so, so that's why like my experience, I think, is valuable, because I went through making all the mistakes and had to learn this all like from an intellectual perspective instead of just it being ingrained and just like the way you did things. So yeah, I love that. And it's weird because it's like, I feel like a lot of it just starts with the behavior, like putting one foot in front of the other, doing what like somebody has told you is like the right way to go about getting what you want. And then it's like the mindset almost follows from that, or at least it seems like that to me for for a lot of people. Like I don't know. Have you found that?
Kind of. So with my background, so I grew up in the Christian faith. Like, I always had that for myself. And I didn't always have it. I mean, I strayed at times, and it wasn't until I was older that I really claimed it for myself as truth. But as growing up with the faith, I was told all the time, just wait, just wait, just wait. And as, yes, you should be, you have to be patient, because it does happen in the timing that it happens. But it's also, it kind of tells you, be passive. That's what I got from it. And it's so, like, that's just, I used to truly believe that that marriage wasn't for everybody, as in, like, it's not something that everybody could have if they wanted it. So I used to be like, well, I guess if, like, God doesn't want me to be married, then I won't be. And, like, now looking back, I'm like, oh, that just breaks my heart, because I just don't believe that anymore, because I do feel like, I don't know, after all the dialogue that I've had, it's just kind of like, and how much I've learned, it's like, you don't have to be passive. You can be very intentional with it, based upon, your behaviors and the things that, just like any goal. If you have a goal, if you work for it, you'll get there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I see things now. Like, yeah, you have to, it's not like you can just be married to just anybody, but there are plenty of great people out there who that is what they want, and that is their goal, and they are working towards that, and it's awesome.
Yeah. And that breaks my heart too. It must have been, that just must feel so devastating to be like thinking, God planted this desire in me to be married, but then he's also going to say, I can't get married. Like, that just doesn't, oh, how sad, how devastating.
Yeah, exactly. And it was for a really long time. I mean, that was something that I really, really wrestled with in my relationship with God, because that didn't only affect, I mean, that affected my whole relationship with God, because it's like, man, like, I know that you're this good father, but yet I have this deep desire. And it was always like, something that my mother always told me is, well, being a Christian doesn't mean that you're going to be happy. And where I get what she's saying, it wasn't telling me the right things. Like, I was getting the wrong message from it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
And so it was just,
people think. We never know how people are interpreting our words unless we like really talk and really make sure they talk back on, what they're thinking, what's in their head, and compare notes and back and forth, kind of like what we're doing. But yeah, because
right.
Misunderstandings all over the place.
Right. I do remember, it was kind of crazy. There's one girl that I went to college with, and I was in this Christian fellowship group with, and she actually told me, she said, Devin, and this just blew my mind. This was something that I was never told, and it was so, like, comforting to my soul, because she was like, Devin, God would not place that specific desire in your heart if he did not fully intend to fulfill it. And I was like blown away, because I was like, huh? Like, I've never been told that before. And I truly, like, I really believe that now. And I don't know, it's just crazy how what I was taught about wanting to be married and wanting to be a wife and just marriage and all of it was just totally way off. And now that I've really been learning so much, even just the last 6 months, it's like I have come so far, and it's amazing. And not just bettering my relationships, but loving myself more.
Mm-hmm.
And wow. That's where it starts. When you start to love yourself more, that's when you can have those healthy relationships, because you have those boundaries, you have all the healthy components that you needed for yourself in order to have those healthy relationships, period.
Yeah, that's huge. And, I remember that love yourself, like, guidance or like advice, and it had left me so lost. Like, I can't even spit the words out. Yeah, I was so confused by that advice. Like, what does that mean? But I feel like
Mm-hmm.
when you pair it with the behaviors that communicate your self-respect, it's like you're talking to
Right.
yourself just as much as you're talking to anybody else, but you got to like put it out there into the real world, or
Mm-hmm.
you just don't believe it from yourself, or at least for me, that's
Right.
what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, you have to know what your values are first and foremost, because if you don't know what those are, then you cannot create those boundaries in the dating phase. You know what I'm saying? And that's the biggest part for me, so like, and
Definitely.
before, so many times I would compromise those values, and that's like, looking back, it's like, dude, what was I thinking? Because if
Yeah.
you're gonna compromise those big things early on, then what kind of marriage are you gonna have?
Yeah.
Not a good one. So
Yeah.
knowing those values first and foremost, so that you can set those boundaries and expectations, so that when you find the person that's meant for you, you will be on the same page. You'll be like, you know what? All right, same boundaries. We respect this. And even if you're not necessarily on the exact same page, but you still respect one another and those boundaries, that's huge.
Yes. You said that so well. That was perfect. Yes, exactly. Yeah, because if you have these values, but then your behavior is like totally contradicting it, you're being
Mm-hmm.
completely, you're lying to yourself, you're being a hypocrite. What kind of person are you going to attract from that? And yeah,
Exactly.
just compromise. Yeah, I love the talk about boundaries, because compromising your boundaries first, just like you said, you have to have the values to know what your boundaries are going to be, and then
Mm-hmm.
act it out and live it out, or else you're just lying. You're just like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's all just pretend.
And maybe that's the root of it for a lot of people. I think maybe a lot of people just don't know really what their values are, or they kind of do, but they really don't. And you have to have that clarity. You have to have that. Otherwise, you can't really move forward into a relationship, a healthy one, unless you know that going in.
Well, yeah, and do you think, or like what I'm adding to it is that the behavior to act out your values is really necessary to even claim them as your values, right? Like
Oh yeah.
if you're not acting out your values, like you can't, just like my tweet yesterday about like, if you say you appreciate someone or you're grateful for something,
Yes.
but you don't act it out, like that's just, you're just lying.
Do you really? Yeah. That
Yeah.
was a really good tweet, by the way. I was like, yes, girl. But so true. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, the same thing with all values. Like if
mhm.
you claim family and marriage and spirituality are like your values and your priorities, but yet you spend all day acting out the reverse of it, can you really claim those are your values?
Right. Exactly. And it's not. Oh, I mean, it's not easy. Like that's the thing. I think people think that it's gonna be like some easy thing, and it's not. I know it's not for me, at least, because I mean, everybody that knows me knows that, I'm a Christian, so I have Christian values, and they are not easy ones to live out. Like for me, like my expectation, my standard, because I am a Christian, my values align biblically. So I'm not, so as far as relationships go, like one of them, just as an example, is, and I talk about this a lot on Twitter, is, waiting until marriage to have sex. And that's just my boundary. That's my expectation. So if I were to not live out those values, and I were to compromise, and I were to give that to myself away to somebody before that, that's just saying that I don't really respect my values, or I really don't believe my values, or I
Right.
really don't, just all of those things. So it's like I have to actually live by those
Exactly.
things.
And then people get confused and caught up thinking like, oh, well, if I compromise my values for this person, then that means that I love them more, or that they're more important to me than even my values. But then what are you connecting on if you don't have a firm value that is even more important than this person? Like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you can't compromise that, especially before you're even married. Like,
Well, which this kind of, I don't know why, but this kind of brings me to the point of, I've seen so many points on Twitter coming from guys that are like, oh, if she doesn't, if, you know, she has these rules and doesn't break them for you, then she really doesn't like want to be with you or whatever. And I'm just like, no. Totally not true at all, because if you don't, you're not going to break your rules for somebody, and you shouldn't have to. Somebody that loves you will never disrespect those boundaries. If they really love you, they will respect and honor those because they honor you, because they love you. That's what love is. A big piece of it. Respect and honor is huge.
Exactly. And like you said, even not being on the same exact page, like not sharing the exact same values or beliefs is even like kind of illustrates that more, because then your respect for that person means that you respect their values even though when they're different from yours, even when their choices are different from yours, then you still respect them.
Right.
That's huge for setting the foundation for a good marriage, because if you have to agree on everything, then you're gonna have a long road being married, because there's so many opportunities to disagree that trying to always like think the same way is gonna be
Well, that's the beautiful thing about relationships, is that we're all no matter what kind they are, like we're all different, and we all come with a different perspective and a different, you know, opinion and viewpoint, and that's okay. Like, you don't have to agree in order to love somebody. And I think people get that so twisted a lot of the time, and I'm not even sure where that necessarily comes from, but I love the beauty in differences. Like, I mean, even just a relationship with you and I, like we don't have the same beliefs on everything. We don't have the same opinion on things all the time, but I love that, because that's how we grow and learn from one another, is that we do have those differences, and that's awesome. How the heck are you going to grow? One of the best things of marriage, there's a million things amazing about marriage, but one of the things is that you're constantly like encouraging one another to grow. And so if you're the same and you're not challenging one another, how the heck are you supposed to grow?
Right. And it comes back to the complementary roles too. Like if you are clones of each other, you can't learn from each other. So you really have to be different. And if you're different, you're not always going to agree. Like that's like the beauty of the masculine and feminine, and in the parenting role too, that you've got those two different sides that have to come together somehow, and seeing that come together in a harmonious marriage is just such a huge lesson for children that you can't, I think you can't replace that with like two clones that just always think the same way.
Right, because if that's the case, somebody's lying.
Right.
Because you're not on the same page always.
Right.
But that's a good point as far as kids. I mean, setting that example, not just as like, hey, this is how a marriage should work, but also just as in general, this is how you respect somebody else with a different perspective or viewpoint in general, which is so important. And we should every single one of us should be able to like, what's the word I'm looking for? We should all be able to express that we, respect one another despite being different, having different opinions.
Yes. Yeah. And that is a huge lesson for kids to learn, because if you think that you're going to go from birth to death with like no challenges, like no disagreements with anyone, then that's you're going to have a hard time. and I mean, and that's what kids kind of think. They kind of have that assumption because you've got the ego that you got to hear from outside. If you're just in the echo chamber of your own head, you think everybody should agree with you, and seeing your parents navigate that difference, I think there's no replacement for that.
True. I agree. Man, I just love talking about marriage. Everything about it I just love it. It's so great. And it's great because like you're married and I'm not even there yet, but it's like that's the great thing about it is coming from different places in life, we can still find the beauty in this and the importance of it and talk about it from different stages of life, which is awesome. I love that.
Yeah, that's so cool and shows your maturity that like it's not like, well, you can't say marriage is so great because not everyone's married, like, you know, that whole thing. So it's like if we don't have that, then we can't talk about it. Then that's pretty immature. So yeah,
right.
Kudos to you. That's great.
Well, I'm not perfect. I used to be that bitter girl. I'm not gonna lie, because it was just like I was so jealous, and I was for a long time consumed by jealousy. And personally, I think that's something that God needed to work through me before I was ever ready, because I couldn't be ready for marriage with all of that within myself. And God was like, I know you're mad at me right now. I know you ain't happy right now, but we got to work through this because I'm trying to prepare you for that, but you're being stubborn. So I'm going to need you to just let that go.
Right. So that actually like pushes it away, right? When you want it so bad that you kind of hate it. It's like, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, yeah, I see that a lot. I mean, I see that a lot in our culture. I see that something that so many people want so bad, but you want it so bad and you want to hold on to it and you try to control it. That's the word I'm looking for. You try to control it so bad that you end up just doing the opposite. You totally repel it.
Right. Which is true of like anything, not just marriage, like, you know, money or wealth or success or, you know, peace or whatever. If you are so like jealous of it, you're not gonna, you can't welcome it in and receive it.
Yes. Amen. Let's preach it.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good stuff.
Yeah, it is. Well, thanks so much for asking me to have this conversation with you. I love it.
Yes. I think that, I was just like, man, all of these things that we've been talking about lately, it has just been really good. And I'm just like, just actually having the conversation and putting it out there sometimes it's just good. Good to have this dialogue between people, for sure.
Great idea. Well, thanks for taking the time today. What else do you have going on today? You're visiting family and
yes. Today is actually my mom's birthday, so I am going to be going to lunch with her and some other family and friends, and that's about and I'm doing some hair while I'm here. So yeah. But yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Good to see you. I just have a normal day at home and picking up the kids, and then we'll do dinner, acting class, things like that. So.
Ooh, fun. You got a fun-filled day.
Yep, normal mommy stay-at-home day. Yep.
It's awesome. I love it.
It's good.
Well, I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
So if you enjoyed watching, please make sure to like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell, follow us on Twitter, and click the link in the description to subscribe to my email list and keep up with all of my content. Thanks so much again for watching. Really enjoyed having you here for this conversation, and I will see you next time. Bye.